This is Asian Insider and I'm Nirmal Ghosh. Now, the news from Myanmar ever since the coup d'etat on February 1 has only grown grimmer by the day. The army, the Tatmadaw, continues to counter wide protests against military rule with a harsh crackdown, which has taken the lives even of children. The country's economy is once again, after just a decade of hope and progress, descending into a very deep hole. Today, joining me again on Asian Insider is Moe Thuzar, coordinator of Myanmar Studies program at the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies, ICES, in Singapore, and from Bangkok, Kavi Chongkittavorn, senior fellow at the Institute of Security and International Studies, ICES, at Chulalongkorn University, and one of the region's most senior and well-known journalists. Thank you very much, both of you, for coming on Asian Insider this morning. So, Moe, Myanmar has been in a state of civil war, as we know, with various armed groups for decades anyway. Now, the population itself is in conflict with the Tatmadaw, which it has been before, but this time there are several new dimensions. A new younger generation adept in the digital space and looking beyond Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, state councillor, yet again under detention. At some point, will the Tatmadaw bring in heavy force to roll through the barricades? And of course, if that happens, we will see many more casualties. But you have said this is a war of attrition. Can you elaborate on that?
Thank you, Nirmal, for giving that brief context. I'd like to start elaborating and providing additional context. But first, I would like to extend my thoughts of solidarity and my prayers to all the families who have lost members of their family during the violence that has escalated since February the 1st, and as well as to the families of those who remain in detention. All these egregious violations of human rights by the military, I think, further pushes the Myanmar people into more desperation, into the midst of more chaos. And with each kidnapping or torture or instance of killing that the military perpetrates, the space is narrowing, even for the entity like the CRPH, to try and explore pragmatic resolutions on behalf of the Myanmar people. I do believe that the CRPH understands the importance of having constructive dialogue with ASEAN collectively, and also recognizes ASEAN's important role in helping Myanmar and her people return to a situation of stability to start the journey again of rebuilding and recovering from this very serious setback, politically, economically, socially. But all this cannot happen until the killings, the arrest, and the torture stops. And I think this is a crucial first step required for any meaningful steps towards a dialogue. But with each side firmly digging in, I'm seeing that space is narrowing. Each violation perpetrated by the military leaves less space for exploring pragmatic and peaceful resolutions. I'll stop here.
Kavi, you have written that ASEAN is deeply concerned and has expressed this, of course, mostly in private. And you also say at this point the conflicting parties will not sit down and negotiate. You wrote that recently. What can ASEAN realistically do to, at worst, manage the situation and at best, hopefully, temper it?
The dilemma with ASEAN is this, because you have 10-member countries, each country have different idea and approach. They all mean well, they all want to see stability and ceasefire occur in Myanmar at this time. So I really support the idea that President of Indonesia, Jokowi, has proposed recently that there should be a high-level meeting of ASEAN leaders to discuss specifically the crisis in Myanmar. I think this is important because ASEAN cannot sit idly, not showing anything. Yes, ASEAN has already held an informal ministerial meeting and came out with statements tracing the ASEAN position, calling for ceasefire, stop using lethal weapons, release of all detainees, and start peaceful dialogues and negotiation. But this will not happen until the Tatmadaw feels confidence that it has everything in control. And I think ASEAN leaders understand and realize that. A lot of people are saying that the Tatmadaw will not listen to ASEAN leader. I would beg to differ. I think the Tatmadaw, the junta, is listening carefully what ASEAN leaders have been saying, what Thailand has been saying, Singapore has been saying, Malaysia, Indonesia. They are waiting for the right time to respond, because whenever you respond, the junta has to follow suit and show the region, ASEAN, and the world that they meant what they said. So it's very important at this particular moment for the ASEAN leader to create a breathing space for all concerned. First, ASEAN leader have already expressed serious concern. Number two, I think if the ASEAN leader get together in Brunei Darussalam, I don't know, maybe some of the leader would not attend this high-level meeting. But whatever it is, it will allow ASEAN leader to discuss for the first time issue.
Do you think there is any space for ASEAN to have any influence at all with the Tatmadaw, realistically speaking?
Well, I think ASEAN is particularly relevant and central to Myanmar in the military's consideration. You know, the military sees ASEAN as a potential source of legitimacy, as we have witnessed by the Commander-in-Chief's presence at the recent ASEAN Chiefs of Defense meeting. So I think building on what Khun Kavi has mentioned, the founding and leading members of ASEAN, together with other leading members in the international community who have an interest in Myanmar's political, economic, and social stability, do have an important role to play. We talk about non-intervention, that's also in the United Nations Charter. But then we've heard from Khun Kavi, over the years, Myanmar, since its membership in ASEAN, has been the most interfered with country in the name of trying to help bring it to the path to development and democratic transition. So I think it's the way that it implied the flexible implementation of what constitutes intervention. And if it affects regional stability, there is every reason to try and reach out and find that dialogue. I think we also need to look at it in that multilateral setting where the group of friends, ASEAN as well as the international community, can explore using the different channels of ASEAN's dialogue partnerships. There is a significant dialogue partnership with the United States. I believe Indonesia is the current coordinator for ASEAN-US dialogue. And these are the different ways and means and channels to have constructive and useful exchanges to promote ASEAN's central role in coordinating an international response on Myanmar. So, again, Myanmar is the country coordinator for ASEAN-China dialogue. What kind of dialogue mechanism can there be when Myanmar itself is facing an unstable situation of instability? So yes, I support what Khun Kavi has mentioned, and bilaterally under the ASEAN framework, different ASEAN member states can provide that much needed humanitarian support in terms of food or assistance to the vulnerable populations, as well as helping to assess where building back for the short, medium, or longer term for economic and social recovery is necessary.
Okay, Khun Kavi, last quick question to you, and again, we're almost out of time, so a brief answer. The China factor, which Moe just alluded to, if China's economic interests are threatened, and we have seen signs of that, what choices does it have? Do you know if ASEAN is actually in dialogue with China over all this?
Well, I have no knowledge of what's going on, but it's very clear from China public statement that China actually would like to see stability inside Myanmar, and China would like to have a normal relation with all countries in ASEAN because of its proximity, not to mention the close relation, the long historical ties with Myanmar. And I think Foreign Minister of China, Wang Yi, has mentioned that he support ASEAN's initiative ASEAN way of engaging Myanmar. So you will see China fully backing whatever ASEAN is planning to do. Norma?
Kavi Chongkittavorn, Moe Thuzar, thank you very much for joining Asian Insider today. Take care out there.
Thank you.
This is quite possibly the greatest crisis and the greatest challenge to its credibility that ASEAN has faced in the last 10 to 15 years. The world is watching ASEAN, Asia is watching ASEAN. Myanmar is teetering on the edge of a precipice. It is looking at a very deep, dark economic hole. And the situation, as we have heard, is a war of attrition, and time is not on ASEAN's side. For Asian Insider, I'm Nirmal Ghosh.